Hello and welcome back to a brand new vlog. My name is Orion. I make videos every single Wednesday and Sunday and post them at 6 p.m. where we are currently in the process of renovating our home and making it a fresh and comfortable space for us to move back into. So I am currently in the process of decorating our lounge and making a breakfast bench to give us some more storage solutions underneath and a place to sit when we put a table here. In the last vlog, we got all the plywood cut down to size and put panels on there and then sealed up any holes that we created. And today I am tackling the daunting task of figuring out how to do the backboard. Now, honestly, this thing has absolutely been racking my brain because I can't figure out the best way to basically create a gap between here and here. Now, originally, I did plan on putting some like rib cages, if you will, down here and across there. But the angle is just so acute that I think it's unnecessary. So I'm trying to think of some better solutions. Now, I've basically come up with 3 ideas. One of them is to use some timber like this, cut an angle at the bottom so it's flush there, and then use that for the backboard to sit on. The other one is to basically create the same thing, but with plywood, so it kind of fills that whole space. And then the final option, which I think is probably the best, is to run some timber across the seat there, and then put some across the wall there for it to basically sit onto and for me to screw into. Because the board isn't actually going to be that high, the gap is only going to be like from here to here, and it's just so hard. I honestly don't think it needs to have like a rib cage that goes up behind it. I think it having a brace at the bottom and then a brace at the top is going to be more enough support for us just to lean against. And to be honest, the issue with doing these 2 like rib cage ideas is this one I have to freehand cut with a circular saw. And whilst this one I can kind of consistently cut the same angle with the miter saw, at the top, I'm still left with a weird angle that I can't cut. Either way, both of these 2 issues have been an issue for me. I just can't figure out how to get the right clean cut. And if I use this idea with the long board there, I can make 2 cuts just as end pieces, and I can take my time with that and sand it down to where I need it to be perfectly. So I think that is what we're going to go with. Hopefully it should end up looking kind of like that. And I am very much someone who kind of learns as they do things. So as I go through this, I might find solutions as we go. But it has been driving me insane trying to figure out the best way to do this with the tools I've got without spending too much money. And getting plywood to make a rib cage that goes all the way across here isn't cheap, so I don't really want to spend the money on that. Either way, what I think we do for now is we use the scrap plywood that I have and kind of try it out as a trial and error to make sure it actually works before we commit to the whole thing. So first thing we need to do is cut it down to size. Using our circular saw. Then using a little bit of masking tape to stick this piece of timber to the top and some scrap timber at the bottom for the placement. The board should fit nicely into there. So it's pushed at the bottom, it's pushed at the top, it's nice and flush there. And oddly enough, with the offcut I made from this freehand earlier, this piece fits on perfectly on the end. And look at that, that is essentially how the seat is gonna go. I think we go for it. I am still concerned about the gap behind it. It bothers me that there's just so much space here and that this is not flush here either. But I don't know, man. I feel like it'll be fine. Even when it hold up with masking tape, if I sit down and lean against it, it's not going anywhere. This is like hardboard plywood. To be honest, I think I'm like stressing out over something that isn't going to be here as like a forever home thing. It's just temporary whilst we still live here. And I made it myself, so I think it's okay. If you have any suggestions or tips, then please do let me know in the comments because it's been fragging my mind and I just can't figure it out. I just feel like I've done such a good job with everything else. I just don't want to ruin it at the last step, but let's go for it. I'm going to commit to my decision, and if it's bad, then we fix it in the future, and I own my mistake and we learn from it. But I think we'll be okay. Okay, with that in mind, we need to get some timber cut for the length that goes across the bottom and across the top there. One thing I am going to do is I'm going to leave a cube in the corner to bring a pillar that comes out there for something later. So with that in mind, I'm going to need 2 lengths of 1230mm. That's one done, and that one is the second one. Now all we need to do is screw it into place, which is honestly a lot easier with 2 hands rather than one. I tried to record it the first time with 1 hand. Didn't go to plan. All right, let's just pop the screw in. And there we go, nice flush top piece. The bottom bit will be much easier. Now that I know all this is flush, I need to just screw a pilot hole in here, and then just bang a screw in. And right, if I've done this correctly, this should fit perfectly. So with our scrap piece of ply from earlier, bang that on there. Look at that. Perfect. Now I just need to cut the main piece to size. All right, here's to hoping we nail this first time. Hope if I switched it on. There's no reason why this shouldn't be right. And by some miracle, I have cut that exactly flush. That couldn't be any flusher if I tried. Now I just need to trim it down to size. And this is a very long cut. So here we go. We can do this. Nice and clean cut. It's a big board. Right, put it back a little bit. Okay, here we go. Well, that seemed to work out okay. And as per my previous assessment, it's perfectly fine to sit against. I also find it absolutely bizarre that my off-cut earlier nearly fits perfectly as an end piece there. You can see there where I have kind of, you know, bent the cut a little bit. It's not a straight, clean cut because I hand cut it. But that's still a pretty good example of what that's going to look like. However, now that I've got it in place, I'm thinking that there's one thing I should have done, or could do. And that is to put a trim of plywood across the top, which means I'd have to lower the whole thing down a little bit so it's flush with the bar. Because from face on, looks great. But when you go to the other side, there's a big piece of plywood sticking out on top of the bar. So I think if we move the timber down 3/4 of an inch and take 3/4 of an inch off this, put a trim on top, that will pretty much be perfect. And after a few cuts later, I moved the timber down a little bit. I've taken a little bit off the backboard here, and the trim sits on perfectly flush with the bar, and it is bang on level. I have also now figured out how to make these cuts perfectly every time. However, now that I've done this, I don't think it's necessary. But what I should have done is basically created my own custom jig where I make essentially a sandwich like this, and I run the plywood I want to cut down the middle, and I lower the depth of my saw so it cuts through both. Essentially using a piece of scrap on top to make the angle perfect every time. But now that we've got this part nailed, let's move on to this bit. So I've got my jig all laid out ready to cut. I basically married up a scrap piece of wood here to the piece that I want to cut, so that way the weight of the blade is actually supported. And then with a little bit of help from Jess to keep it all plumb. With all the fancy words, we should get a nice clean cut. Okay, hopefully that should be perfectly to size. Which, when I line them up, they are. Now I just need to cut it down to length. And hopefully this board should fit perfectly right here. So it's flush against there. And it is bang on there. We nailed it. Now that we know we've got the perfect backboard, let's get the timber in. A few screws later, we've got the base on. And to do the top piece, I'm gonna need this. And that is so when I screw this into the wall, I'm screwing directly into a stud. Well, everything is going to plan so far. I've got a screw in at the end, I've got a screw in at that end, and I've got one in the middle. This is honestly not going anywhere. Time for the moment of truth. Let's put the backboard on. I am really hoping I've done this right, so I don't have to fix anything. I have a spare if needs be, but I've done it wrong. How have I messed that up? One end is higher than the other, even though it's level. Is it level? Did I cut the board wrong? No, all of my measurements are right, but for whatever reason, when I put the timber on there, it's level, but it's not the same as the board, even though the bench is level. Honestly, not sure, but I'm just gonna raise it up a little bit so it meets and it's flush. Adjustment made, but that is bizarre. It's flush now, completely flush on both ends, and it's now level. But it was level before. I don't get it, but it works. Either way, I can now sit on my bench that I have made and works perfectly. Now you may be wondering why there's a gaping big gap here, and I probably could have met the two boards if I wanted to. However, what I plan to do with this is bring a box section out kind of like this. So you'll have essentially a cube in the corner that will come all the way out here and probably sit maybe higher than this, maybe a little bit higher, I'm not sure. I'll probably make it flush in the end, but it's basically going to come out here so I can stick a socket at the top. Because for the first 5 years of living here, I've had sockets under the bar, which is nice, but I kind of was against having a socket raised from the bar because I figured it was always going to be raised. But in this absolute bombshell of a kitchen, the sockets are right in that corner there. And when you want to do stuff in this area of the kitchen, there's no socket. So if I put like a rising socket here, if I ever want to use something, like when Jess is cooking, she can cook stuff here and use a socket right there. For the longest time, I've had this pinned to the wall, and I've been using this essentially an extension lead. And I figured I might as well do it properly and something more in place, because once I built the bench here, I could put this back here if I wanted to, or I could get one of those rising sockets that come up and it goes away when you need it to, which I think is probably the best option. But I think for now, we get this all finished and screwed in. Well, I was going to, but my drill died, so I've done the trim. instead. And I was going to do the end pieces as well, but I'm not sure if I'm going to be putting MDF panels across here just to make it a little bit nicer. I've seen some that I like that will go across here really nicely, and it won't look like this. It will kind of have like these grooves in between to separate them, but I'm not sure right now. So until I make that decision, I'm just not going to do the end pieces. But a little bit of time later, we have completely finished this segment of the bench. I have got everything glued in and screwed in, so everything's now insecure, firmly in place. It's not going anywhere. One thing I have noticed while doing this and using this and sitting on it and stuff like that and put my weight on it is it's slowly sunk into the carpet. So this is super snug in here now. It's not like, it's really not going to come out if I put it in there. So I'm going to need some kind of handle on this if I ever want to get in there. Same with that one. So that is something that I'm going to have to think about and come back to. But I believe for now, this is all we can really do. I need to get everything sealed up, then measure that box in the corner there so I can build a bit in there. And I think in the next vlog, we can finally get round to finishing this off with some paint. It's been quite the headache to put all of this together, but I'm glad I've finally done it. Hard work definitely pays off. It's obviously not the finished product right now, and it looks still a bit in the building process, which it is. Obviously when I fill in all of the gaps and then I put the panels on it and stuff like that, it'll look really nice how the bedroom turned out. I remember in stages this didn't look great, but now it does. So I think I'm going to give myself a little bit of a break for today and wrap up this vlog here. I hope you did enjoy it. If you did, please leave it a thumbs up rating. I appreciate that. This is quite the headache to do, and it's been racking my brain, so I'm glad I've got it done. And if you do, like the content, then I like rating really does help show that. If you're new here, then make sure you hit subscribe because we're on our way to 25k. But as always, guys, it's been Orion. Thank you so much for watching. Peace, much love. Bye-bye.